Hi, Nick.
Hey, Mojeanne. Oh, are we good? Are we?
Oh.
Do we need an action?
Uh,
We're good.
Action. Yeah,
Okay.
we're good.
All
We
right.
good,
Cool.
we
Cool.
good,
Cool.
we
Cool.
good.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Mojeanne.
Your album, Glass Gallery, is a sonic experience that abounds with references to art history and architecture. For instance, the National Gallery played a huge role in the crafting of the album. And its architect, Mojeanne Behzadi, had the intention of creating a space that was for ceremony, procession, celebration. I'm curious to know how the gallery's building influenced your crafting, your architecture of the sound in this album.
Yes, the album is very much an ode to the National Gallery in Ottawa. It's a space I've visited ever since I was really young, and from a young age, it filled me with a sense of awe. But in more recent years, I've developed a sort of reverence for the space, and the mention of like procession. If anyone's ever been there, you'll know about the ramp that slowly leads up into this very expansive great hall. And I think Mojeanne Behzadi did such a good job at priming an audience to be in a very receptive state to kind of commune with the artworks therein. And that feeling of receptiveness and like being prepared to be inspired is pretty much the state of mind that I was in when I made this music.
Yeah. I mean, I think about listening to the album, and I find that the experience of moving through a museum, of wandering, is something that that contemplative state is something that your album really also creates. That state is. Is contemplation something that was on your mind?
Yeah, well, I think that certain environments are especially conducive to contemplation, the gallery being one of them, going for a walk in the woods, libraries. And I think that in some way I want to make music that kind of led the listener down this contemplative path as well. And I hope that, you know, in some way that the music and these environments even pairs together.
We've talked about what you call the central atrium. It's called the Grand Hall.
Great Hall.
Great Hall. Tell me about how the Great Hall, which is the name of your first song, I think.
Yeah,
on
Central
the album?
Atrium.
Central Atrium.
Yeah, so the gallery means a lot to me. I've had so many memories there, but I always felt so charged with inspiration whenever I was there. So it was pretty much this beautiful, beautiful room. It's basically like a crystal castle or like glass cathedral. And yeah, I mentioned the state of reverence that I have when I'm in this place. And I think that it does help lend itself. I'm totally losing my train of thought. Look-a-doo.
This guy.
Yeah, could you ask the last question again?
The Central Atrium is the name of the first song on your album. It alludes to the Great Hall in the museum, which is the central space, and it's quite astounding.
Yeah, it's iconic.
Yeah. Could you tell me about how that space, its structure, played a role in that song?
Yeah. Well, we talked about procession and leading into this space, and Central Atrium to me has this similar type of introductory theme, and it very much felt like there was a strong semblance between the act of walking up this ramp into this expansive cathedral-like room, and then very much a sense of arrival. And I think that the song and the space kind of mirror each other in that way. But There's also a more physical dimension to the space that is reflected in the compositional style. And I like how the gallery itself, this main room, the Great Hall, it's very much like it has a skeletal structure to it that just beyond being all glass, you are very much connected with the world around you. And I tried in my music to have a sense of like structure, often portrayed through the arpeggiations, with a sense of texture and ambiance, the sky in the Great Hall, and that would be conveyed through more lush chordal harmonic elements.
Yeah, it feels really expansive.
Yeah, it certainly is.
So beyond the architecture, you reference few paintings that are in the National Gallery's collection. For instance, Snow Blue Square refers to Canadian artist Michael Snow's Lac Clair, which is your favorite painting in the gallery.
Yes.
And you also reference pieces by Paul Klee, if I'm not mistaken, and Molinari, Guido Molinari. Could you tell me about how these three artists, being abstract painters, geometric painters, how that style was something important to you?
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I've been going to the gallery since I was a kid. I have a lot of memories there, but in recent years, I felt this sort of magnetic draw towards one room in particular that is just filled with abstract geometric painters, especially Canadian painters, like Claude Toussaint and Guido Molinari from the Nouveau Plasticien movement in Quebec, and then also Michael Snow in Toronto. And there are other artists like Paul Klee and Joseph Albers that I just started to find that there was a very specific mix of structure and ambiance in these paintings that I, in some way, felt a relationship with. And especially in the paintings, the combination of like gesture and form and shape, I started to think so specifically about how these same elements would translate very easily into a musical composition. So I really did try to create sonic equivalents of these paintings with those elements in mind.
Amazing. Do you want to talk a little bit about your favorite painting, Lac Clair?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting piece. It's about 6 feet by 6 feet, and it is basically just a big blue square. It seems quite unassuming, and it has a sort of passivity to it. It's something that, like how Brian Eno describes ambient music, it's as ignorable as it is interesting. And something I like about it is that it's so much about this minimalism. Even though I know Michael Snow refers to himself as a maximalist, there's this silence to the painting, and I feel like a lot of people might easily pass it by, but it always called to me, and I feel like if you really listen, it has a lot of like a profound message to convey. And yeah, unfortunately, it's actually not on exhibition anymore.
No. We'll have to write the curators.
Yeah, but yeah, it's my favorite for sure.
Amazing. There's a piece on your album called Getty Garden, and it transports us to another museum, the Getty Center in LA, that is known for its breathtaking gardens, among which I think it's called the Main Garden, which is designed by world-renowned artist, installation artist Robert Irwin. And you have a personal experience in that space, and that piece being floral and light. And can you describe how you came to this piece and how that experience influenced it?
Yeah, so naturally the album Glass Gallery is an ode to the National Gallery, but I found that I had a very similar type of inspired reaction when I was visiting the Getty Center to play a show there in 2018. And before the show, Sarah Davachi, one of my favorite composers, was playing in the Getty Center's garden. And it was just so beautiful. It's this labyrinthian garden set on atop a hill, blue skies, and travertine structure of the museum itself. It all was just absolutely breathtaking. And yeah, I just remember this very kindred moment of hearing this music, wandering the garden, and looking up and seeing this hummingbird sipping nectar from a flower. And when I came up with this song, it just absolutely transported me back to that moment. And yeah, I think something I'm trying to get at with this piece and many of the other pieces is the idea of like architecture as art. And I was finding myself as drawn to the sites as I was to the artwork, and they really filled me with this like incredible, inspired feeling.
What a beautiful image, that hummingbird.
I know.
They're really special.
Yeah.
For me, your music and this album is in a lineage to the likes of Brian Eno and John Cage, who are musicians who are also often associated with having profound impact on the art historical canon, notably in the Fluxus movement from the 60s and 70s. And I think about John Cage, his concept of chance and indeterminacy, which is about allowing the musician to use randomness and freedom into the process of making. And I wonder if that's something that you relate to in your process with this album?
Yeah. I definitely appreciate John Cage's different philosophies towards sound, and I'm obviously inspired by Brian Eno stylistically. And there is a lot of chance at play in the compositional process. For this album, I tend to write a piece in one sitting, and that's it. I made all of the album, all the tracks on the album in a 3-week span, and I had really no predetermined idea as far as the harmony and composition would go. It was really to sit down and let something happen, and I was in a very reactive state. So if something kind of jumped off the page, then I would pursue it and just let this kind of snowball effect accumulate. There's this other element of chance that I'll quickly describe that essentially I would sometimes work on one half of the piece at a time on solo. So I would create a whole chordal harmonic element, a pad, something very ambient and textural. I create this, idea one. I mute that, and then I move on to the more rhythmic elements, arpeggiations that are interacting with each other, and I'm listening to just that element, and I get it to a good place. And once I have both of these elements, that's when I actually listen to them together for the first time and see how they interact with each other. And I came up with this idea when I'd be looking at the abstract geometric painters and see some kind of combination of structure and texture, and think about, I wonder if they came up, which element came first, and I just decided to experiment with that idea sonically.
Amazing. And knowing you, that's not something you were doing before. You didn't leave as much room to just chance. You in the past edited a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. I have kind of been exploring the idea of letting go and just harnessing the moment through my solo practice, whereas in other projects, there's so much diving into the details Whereas with Glass Gallery and my first album, Water Sign, what happened in that moment is the piece, and it reflects that moment pretty purely, very little editing going on. The only thing that I really did to kind of embellish Glass Gallery was that after the 3 weeks of creating all the demos, I then took those demos to a nearby church in Ottawa, and I re-amplified every stem, it's called, every little synth element, and I tried to kind of recreate the expansive central atrium in sound at the church, because in some way I always kind of imagined this music at the central atrium of the National Gallery.
Well, that's amazing, because I was going to ask you if you envisioned your music at the National Gallery, because in recent years, the museum's curatorial departments have embraced experimental music increasingly. Like I'm thinking of a MoMA PS1 in New York that has a curator for their warm-up summer music festival, and the Whitney Museum has had exhibitions on musical legends like Cecil Taylor, and created a lot of like performance programming around those exhibitions. And we're sitting at the Centre Phi tonight having this conversation. So do you think that it's in the future to play at the National Gallery?
Fingers crossed, obviously. But as I would go around the gallery, there's all these little nooks and crannies, like this water court and the garden court and the central atrium, and there's all these little places that I would just kind of imagine the soundtrack to that particular environment. So I like the idea of actually creating works that are in the kind of rest spaces of a gallery as well, and that it kind of, you hear the echo of it as you're in the exhibition.
Amazing. Well, who knows what 2021 or 2022 could bring.
Yeah, here's hoping.
Yeah. Thank you, Nick.
Mojeanne, thank you. And thank you.